good evening to you. Thank you so much for sticking to Y254 TV. My name is Cheryl Blessing and I am your host on the Power Talk Show. So this is the second week of February, and I want us to talk about mental health because we have been dealing with so much as a community and the globe at large. There has been political influences, economic and social influences that can bring down our mental health. I want us to know, do we understand the root cause of mental health issues, and how do we address them and create more awareness about the issues that we're dealing with? So joining me live on set is someone who has spent most of her life towards mental health issues, particularly in children and in the youth. So Namrata Shah is here with us. She is a trainer at the Art of Living, and thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thanks, Cheryl. It's lovely to be here and to sit with you to have this important conversation about mental health in youth and children. And also individuals, you know, adults too. Yeah,
because it cuts across every single generation.
Yes.
Yes. So I want us to get into this conversation because it's a very important conversation. We have been seeing a lot of suicide, a lot of murder, and just general displeasure about how life is going on and things that are happening around us. So I want us to tackle mental health. As we are progressing with this month of love, we can only do better if we understand some of our mental health issues. So I want you to go on our social media platforms, which is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Ask me any question that you have about understanding your mental health. How do you deal with your mental health issues? Are there any healthy ways that you can advise someone to tackle their issues through? So write us on social media. That is at Y254 on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm going to sample some of those comments as we progress. You can also find me on my personal pages, which is at Cheryl Blessing. So I think to just get into the conversation, your main focus from our discussion has been the youth and the children. I want to understand how serious is mental health issues in these two particular age groups in this day and time?
I would say it's at a crisis. I've taught more than 3,000 youth since 2017 and children and individuals. And the trend I'm observing is alarming. You know, that's why I came today to sit here to have this conversation with you. I find that we're not educating our children on how to regulate their emotions, how to learn how to deal with our emotions, you know.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if we're angry, we're not able to understand how to let go of that anger. You're so easy to tell a child or a youth, don't be angry, it's not good for you. But then you yourself also don't know how not to be angry, and you're asking the child or your children not to do that. So understanding how to learn how to deal with anger, to deal with negative emotions like resentment, like frustration, all of this needs to be learned, I feel, you know.
Yeah.
And also from a psychological point of view, we have triggers, we have challenges, we have a broad spectrum of emotions that are complex. You have them, right?
Yes.
So a child has them too, a youth has them too. Adolescence is so difficult to deal with. And how does a parent look at that? How does a parent deal with that? Even they are finding it tough, you know.
Yes.
Your child could be locking himself in the room all day. I'm sure you know that. And not coming out even to have a meal or discuss anything with you. So how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this crisis that the children, youth, and individuals are facing?
And you see, I like that you've put that so clearly, because based on that explanation, it's rooted from our childhood.
Yes.
It starts at home, because what you've described is something that is very common. People just locking themselves in their room, people being quiet, people being on their phones all the time. These are habits that we observe in people, but we don't ask them, are you okay? Could you be dealing with something? Is something on your mind?
Yes.
We just ignore it and say, "Huyu anakuanga hivyo," or that's just the way they are. So I want to really understand what's the impact of the home life, the childhood, especially from infancy. You know, as you've said, sometimes the parents don't even know how to deal with some of the issues.
Yes.
They don't know that they're angry, they don't know that they're sad, or they've carried trauma from their own childhood. So what is the impact of having a family life of parents who do not truly understand? And how does it really impact an individual as they progress in their life?
You know, from childhood, if you're not taught how to regulate your emotions, that basically means how to deal with a certain emotion. It carries on into adulthood. So, for example, if I'm always, let's say, bullied, I was bullied as a child, and I carry that trauma into my adulthood, I don't know how to deal with it. So my relationships are affected. I could blame my parents. You know, you always look for something to blame. I could blame my friends, the people who bullied me, or the school I was in. You know, we look for a hook to blame, but we're not really looking at the root of the problem. How can we deal with it? How can we move through it? And so the parents are also facing that situation. At home, when you're sitting at the table, you're not able to see your child going through something difficult, but you're also helpless because you're not having that conversation with the child. So it starts first with communication. How are we communicating to our children? No one is expecting you to be happy all the time or to be a perfect parent. You will make mistakes, but are you communicating to the child at their level, not at your level? That means we're not shouting on our children, or we're not, you know, pushing them back because they're trying to express themselves. You give them a space at their level to explain, and then you are able to go into the conversation with the child. You know, so that's the first thing, communication. And it starts at the dinner table. It starts in the home. And, you know, I feel nurturing a child's emotions rather than making them repressed is a very important part of mental health. And a parent plays a key role, whether it's the father or the mother. And the problem that we face in today's world is that the world is moving so fast. The parents are also stressed. They have fast-paced jobs. They have fast-paced lives. They have to earn, pay bills. There are financial issues that they can't share with the child, you know. There are relationship issues. You can't, you know, dump it on your child. So learning how to manage this dynamic now has become a key mental health question for the 21st century.
And you see, I like that you brought up the aspect of bullying, because we can look at bullying from two aspects. There's the bullying that can occur outside your home, at school, among your friends, in the playground, but there's bullying that happens at home.
Yes.
Sometimes it's even your parents or your relatives,
yes,
or your older siblings or younger siblings. Sometimes the parents can project their frustration and anger towards their children without really understanding the impact that has. So how do you address, especially with younger kids and the youth, how do you address bullying that comes from your parents? When your parent just says something or calls you a certain name because of their own frustration, but because they don't understand that it's going to impact you, you can't even communicate that. How do you deal with that? And then we can get into the bullying that happens from the external side.
You know, sometimes the parent themselves face a lot of issues when they are children. And if you look at the generational gap of information, your parent didn't have the same information you have access to today. So they were also a victim of their own circumstance. So the way I would look at it is with a little bit of compassion. You know, my parent may be telling me something because he or she also faced something when they were younger, right?
Yeah.
I could tell you easily that it's easy to blame somebody because you're being humiliated all the time, or you're being told off about something that you're maybe not be your fault. And that can be very traumatizing for a child. So again, I would say, have the conversation about emotions, have the conversation rather than being confrontational with the parent about what to do. I can't expect an 8-year-old child to do that. So I would expect the adult to understand this more than the child.
That is
so I'm
true.
Speaking from both fronts here. And of course, I'm understanding the complexity of the issue, because what generally happens in a home is that everyone shuts down and no one wants to talk about it. It's better that way, because then there is a silent peace in the house. But that takes away so much of your childhood from you. Your happy moments, your good moments, you know.
And you know, I feel like most people, especially with some African cultures, they like sweeping things under the rug.
Yes.
And they'll ignore it, and you know, that piles up over time. And when it becomes a mountain, you wonder, what's the trigger? But it's because things have been piled up, issues have been piled up over time. And as you've said, it's easier for an adult to understand that my parent is also a human. who had their own experiences, and because of their experiences, they may be a certain way or act a certain way. But now let's look at the aspect of bullying from the external side, and where especially you can't open up to maybe your friends or your family or even the teachers at school, where you're bullied at school and you just have to, you hold on and you wonder because it affects your mental health seriously and even your performance sometimes. So how do you address that? Because as you've shared, I also experienced bullying at some point, and I didn't realize how it impacted me up until I got older. How do you deal with that, especially at an age where you're so vulnerable and you're just forming your personality and your character, but someone is trying to bring you down?
Yes. You know, I find that bullying has become normal somewhere in school. It's become a very accepted part of school culture. Maybe the educators are not for it and they're taking all the action they can, but the children themselves, amongst them, they are, you know, they have this peer group and they have this pressure where they feel like they have to show that they are somebody or something. And it's natural to have an identity, you know, your ego identity, because you're developing it as a child. But where it becomes bullying is when you feel like you have to prove something to another child and it becomes normal, it's part of your behavior. So for the child, it's very debilitating. You lose your self-esteem, you feel hopeless, and you feel like you can't turn to anyone. And the problem comes bigger when you go to somebody who's elder than you. Let's say I would go to my brother or my sister who's older than me, or my educator, my teacher, or an aunt or an uncle. Those are the natural people you turn to, but they also are hands off, you know, because they don't understand. You see, we expect people to understand our emotions when we're younger, but they don't get it. Because you went through bullying, only you know what you went through, right?
Yeah.
I went through it, only I know. So when I'm saying it on live television, I know somebody who's not been through it won't understand it.
They can share their experience.
Yes. So as a society, maybe we can change that conversation and become more compassionate and empathetic towards what's happening around us.
Yeah.
Like we're so quick to shut off people because I want to look at my phone. I want to see what's happening on Instagram. So I've lost a conversation with somebody, right?
Yeah.
And these learning habits are being caught by children as well. They are also quickly picking up their phones, not having conversations with their parents, you know. It's a big problem. So we do need to address it and we need to talk about it.
We need to. Yeah. And I feel like especially among the kids, because the kids can't really express, or once they'll express it in their own simple way, they expect you to understand. And the minute they feel like they shared one time that they were bullied or they went through this, and you weren't that receptive, they close off.
Yes.
They might get the impression that all adults are the same, or, you know, this is just, it's a minor problem, you have to deal with it. But how can we encourage, especially young parents, because there are some people who've just started families, they have no idea how to go about raising these kids. How can you be receptive to notice that my child is going through something, and once they share that someone bullied them or someone did something, how can you help them to better understand how to deal with the matter?
You know, the best way to have is to nurture your child and nurture their emotions. One is to understand your child's personality. You know, every child is unique. Not everybody is the same. So you understand your child and know what is sensitive for them. What are they sensitive to? They may not like something, they may like something. And then to have a conversation at their level. As adults, because we're short of time, we're short of so many things in a day, and we want to give the best to our child. I would say the best you can give today is 1 hour of your time to your child. You know, it's really a bonus, I would feel. I didn't think one day I would say this, because generally parents do give time to their kids. But truly speaking, with the way we're so fast paced, we are moving in such a direction in the world. We have to be 24/7 on jobs or on call, or as mothers with 3 children, it's difficult to have that dynamic.
That's true.
So if you give 1 hour of your time a day, you're actually giving so much to the child for their future. Whether they would be whether they would be successful in jobs or relationships is very much based on that.
On their childhood.
Yes.
And you know, as you've said, it's let's be honest, if we're talking about the men particularly, they'll avoid the home because of certain issues.
Yes.
It might be issues with the spouse or with the work life, and they don't have anyone to share that with. So they might pass through somewhere just to hang out, watch football,
Yes.
have a drink, but they miss out on hanging out with their children. But then that has an impact on the kids. So how can you, especially because I feel bad for the boy child in particular, because they have such a harder time dealing with mental issues and just sharing that with someone. So they look for alternatives of expressing this issues. But how can you address someone who's probably avoiding their home because of certain issues that do not have anything to do with the child, but they need to spend some time with the child? There's this belief that once you're paying bills, once you're providing food and whatnot, that's more than enough for the child, but the child needs a bit more. So what would you advise a young father, or just a father who's been avoiding the home life because of one issue or the other, the value of taking time to spend time with your children?
You know, I find most men are, and young fathers, they're ready to give everything to their children. I find that in general. But what they're not confident about is, will I live up to being a good father? I would say drop that label. You will live up to being a good father. And then what happens is, over the time, we've lost that ability or that space where men can safely express themselves, or even boys. You know, I teach what's known as the youth leadership training programs and the art of living youth programs. And so I'm talking from this point of view, where I've trained so many of the young children and the youth, boys and women and young girls, and I've heard their conversations. And what's been unique about these programs is we provide a space where the children and the youth are able to safely express themselves. So we discuss every dynamic. You know, there's a youth program where 18 to 32-year-olds are given the space to discuss a dynamic of a relationship. So both the men, the young men and the young girls are able to say, hey, you know what, what bothers me. It bothers me that you're not emotionally available. But in general, men are not emotionally expressive. The problem is the expectation we have, right?
Yeah.
Like, you think you'll walk in at home and your person you love the most will say to you, I love you, but they're having a bad day too. You get what I'm saying?
Yes.
So how do we navigate all of this? How do we smile through our challenges? How do we build resilience? How do we change the narrative on mental health for youth, children, the boy child, individuals, adults? I would say breathing, and that's what I've been teaching since I was 19 years old.
Yes.
I'm now going to be 46 in March, and you know, it's worked.
And you know, first of all, you look wonderful. I was just telling you before we started the show, you look wonderful for your age. I would never have guessed that. So obviously, the breathing and the meditation works. So I want us to get into that as we progress with the second half of the conversation. But now let's focus on the boy child. The mental health of the boy child is at risk.
Yes.
And that's why we have so many people who are so frustrated on social media. The past few weeks, we've had the march on the femicide, and the women have been rallying against femicide and against the murder of fellow women. But you find that some men come up and have some very toxic ideologies, what we would express as toxic.
Yes.
There was this one video that went around about two men saying that they will murder women because of pizza and because of dates and because of giving them money, and they don't reciprocate what they expect. But it's because they don't have a channel of expressing or someone, a role model who can guide them. So can we talk about how can we help the boy child? Because the girl child has been really prioritized in the past few decades, but then the boy child has been neglected. And the mental health of the boy child is at risk because they have so much pressure from society, from the family, and all these aspects that expect them to just be men and just be on top of everything. But what if the boy is not on top of everything? What if they're dealing with so much they can't even get up out of bed? How do we help the boy child?
You know, there is such a high expectation and pressure on the boy child and men in general to perform. Yeah, to perform at the job, to perform, to provide, to perform, to do everything. So the general psychology of a man is to shut down if he feels he's not going to that level. And how can we help that? I would say, you know, over the years that I've taught my youth, and they being young men, they prefer to talk in a circle, you know, in a circle of men, where they feel safe, they can say what they want, they can express, come up with solutions and ideas. The problem is, as a society, whether it's women, men, children, youth, educators, we're not coming up with solutions. We're not saying, if this is the problem, this is what we can do. And the best people for the solution is you yourself, right?
Yes.
So are you taking that step towards mental health for you? And then providing for your family, not expecting that when you go home, you're going to be told you're not doing this or you're not doing that. And most men are facing that because the woman is so empowered. She is going out and working and making her life, you know, and she is confident. And so the the boy child has been sidelined. They've not been able to express safely that, yes, this is how I feel. Maybe there is a dynamic that we need to discuss. And I'd leave that to the men to say, you know.
Because it has to come from within,
Exactly.
as you're saying.
Yeah.
And you know, most times it's because they do not feel like I can share this and that with this particular person.
Exactly.
So I want us to dive deeper into this conversation right after we take a very short break. So stick to Y254 TV. This is the Power Talk Show, and we are trying to understand how can we nurture our mental health. So stick with us and go on our social media platforms, share your comments, ask your questions. When we come back, we will sample all of that.